The third invocation was already failing and Salen Thor would not stop chanting it. I had recorded 11 transferences in my tenure as senior archivist of the Hollow Anchorage, and I had never once heard a matriarch's voice catch the way hers caught now, on the binding word, the one that was supposed to open the vessel like a door held for an honored guest. The chair held the vessel still, a girl 18 years old, dark-haired, ordinary, the kind of plain the Order liked because plain meant uncomplicated, plain meant nothing in the way. Ward 11. Nora, the kitchens called her, though no name was entered on her intake scroll beyond a foundling's tag and a manifest page so water-stained at the corners that no one had ever bothered rereading it. Salen's own body lay in the lower cradle, 2 centuries old and finally giving out, the accumulated weight of 900 years of continuance pressing against organs that could no longer carry it. Tonight the weight was supposed to cross over. Tomorrow the girl in the chair would wake up wearing the matriarch's memory the way every vessel before her had, blinking, briefly confused, and then simply continuing, the Order's oldest mercy, the Order's oldest lie, that nothing of the host was ever truly lost, only folded in. I lit the second ring of lamps. The instruments along the wall, 6 brass dials, each reading a different layer of the binding, should have begun climbing in clean sequence the moment the second invocation closed. 2 climbed. For sat dead level, needles trembling against the pin the way they did in an empty room. She isn't resisting, I said, because someone had to say it. She isn't anything yet, Salen answered, and pushed the third invocation harder. By the time the lamps reached full ring, every dial in that cradle should have been reading a seam, the fine internal division every sapient mind carries, the place where a second consciousness can be folded in without tearing the first. I had watched Salen find that seam in 11 hosts before this one, fast, almost contemptuous, the way you'd find a door you'd opened 100 times. She circled this girl's mind for the better part of an hour and found nothing. Not a locked door. Not a guarded one. No door at all, a single unbroken wall, floor to ceiling, with the girl's whole awareness standing flush against every inch of it. Recalibrate the lower dial, Salen said. Her voice had gone thin. I recalibrated it. It read the same. The girl, through all of this, sat with her hands open on her knees and watched the ceiling. Not glazed. Not vacant the way the chair usually left them, half present, waiting to be filled. Watching. At one point she asked, in a perfectly level voice, whether the lamps were always this warm, and I did not know how to answer her, because no vessel had ever asked me a question mid-rite before. Salen tried the fourth invocation, which was not in the liturgy. I had only ever heard of it being spoken twice, both times against a host whose will was strong enough to be a problem, and even then, the liturgy promised, will was not structure. Will could be exhausted. What Salen needed was a seam, and the fourth invocation didn't make one. It only forced harder against whatever was already there, on the theory that even an unbroken wall has a hairline somewhere, if you push from the correct angle for long enough. The 2 underpriests assigned to the lamps had stopped tending them and were simply standing against the far wall, watching the dials the way you watch whether you cannot get indoors from in time. I did not blame them. In 11 prior crossings I had never seen the underpriests stop working before the binding closed, and I had certainly never seen Salen Thor call for the secondary chant, the one meant only to widen a seam already found, never to search for one that wasn't there. She called for it now. Her voice, reciting words meant for a door already half open, sounded like someone reading directions to a building that had been torn down. The dials began climbing then, all 6 at once, but wrong, not the smooth ascent of a binding taking hold, but a ragged, overloaded climb, the needles fighting their own housings. I had never seen that pattern. I checked the calibration twice and changed nothing about my answer. The resistance is structural, I said. It isn't her will. There's no second place in her for the line to go. There is a second place in everyone, Salen said, and her voice was no longer thin. It was raw, and underneath the rawness, for the first time in 2 centuries, afraid. I have done this 11 times. I will do it a 12th. She drove the invocation forward with everything the cradle could feed her, the last reserve a dying matriarch keeps for exactly one purpose, the crossing itself, never meant to be spent forcing a door that does not exist. I watched 4 centuries of stored continuance pour out through the binding lines and arrive, every measurable particle of it, at a wall that did not move, did not thin, did not so much as register that anything had touched it. The girl's pulse, on the 7th dial, the one we use only to confirm the vessel is still alive enough to be worth filling, sat at 61 beats and did not climb once through any of it. I had recorded that number 11 times before this rite, in 11 different hosts, and every previous reading had spiked past 90 the instant the binding made contact. Hers never moved. Whatever Salen was doing to her, it was happening to a wall, not a person, and the wall did not feel the difference between a knock and 900 years thrown against it at once. The collapse, when it came, was not the girl's. Salen Thor had spent the entirety of her crossing reserve trying to open a door that had never existed, and a continuance with nowhere to land does not simply return to where it started. It scatters, looking for purchase, and finds none, because the only mind in that chamber built to receive it had just demonstrated, conclusively, that it received nothing. I watched the lower cradle's readings fall the way they fall at the true end, not the practiced, prepared end the order writes hymns for, but the other kind, sudden, untidy, 2 centuries unspooling all at once with nowhere left to be carried. By the time I reached her, Salen Thor was simply gone, in the old way, in the way the order had built an entire liturgy specifically to avoid. The chair released the girl a moment later, the restraints disengaging on their own once the binding lines went dark. She rubbed her wrists, looked at the lower cradle, looked at me, and did not ask what had happened to the old woman lying there. I think she already understood, in whatever plain, unbroken way she understood everything else in that room. "Can I go back to the kitchens?" she said. Not a question, really. A statement shaped like one, the way she'd asked about the lamps. I told her yes. I have reread her manifest twice since that night. The water damage obscures the world of origin field almost entirely, but not the designation beside it, which some clerk decades ago had simply transcribed without understanding, Class 15. I had never heard the term before that week. I have learned a great deal about it since, in the careful, after-the-fact way the order learns everything it should have asked about first. The continuance liturgy has been amended. Every future vessel now requires a verified origin world reading before the chair is so much as prepared, a single new clause added beneath 9 centuries of older ones, written in my own hand because no one else in the keep would write it. Some minds are not rooms with doors. Some are walls the whole way through, and the line that meets one does not bend it. It simply ends there. I have not prepared the chair since. I tell myself it is because no successor has yet been named. That is true, as far as it goes. It is not the whole of it. The whole of it is that I keep seeing her pulse holding at 61 through 900 years thrown at the door of her, and I no longer trust myself to stand in that room and call what we did to our hosts, for 9 centuries before her, anything as gentle as continuance. She still works the kitchens. I pass the hall some mornings and hear her quietly arguing with the ovens, the way anyone argues with an old machine that won't behave, and there is nothing in her voice that remembers what the chair tried to take from her, because the chair never found anything to take.